Hello and welcome again to the Get Sustainable show produced by ESBN in partnership with Green Europe Today and Live Stream Studio. This week we were really lucky to grab hold of Robert Adamczyk, advisor at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, who is currently in Poland between projects. Robert is responsible for assessing environmental and social risks and opportunities in projects the bank finances and is the ESG focal point in the bank's environmental and sustainability department. Glad you could join us today, Robert.
It is a pleasure to be here with you, and I've seen many of your programs, so it's nice to be invited.
Thank you very much.
And it's also a pleasure because I think we both share similar backgrounds in terms of our Polish-British connections, and therefore that our European strength is quite important. And ESG, I think, is this international approach, which I think what we embed in our day-to-day.
Well, absolutely. The world is getting smaller, and I think our cases are quite becoming more commonplace now.
I'm a bit older, so my case was a bit sort of less common at that stage. I've been working now for nearly 28 years in the environmental business in Eastern Europe and particularly Poland. So it is, I think, it's now more common, but when I started, it was very much this terra incognita in terms of what we're trying to do. The issues were different and the legacies were different, and of course the world's moved on. And a lot of it thanks to an international approach, thanks to the European Union. And I think we see what's happening in Poland where we are. We're in a different shape and place than we were 20, 15 years ago. So pleasure, and thank you for the invite.
So why don't we move on to the first question, Robert? Most people have heard of the EBRD and are vaguely familiar with its mission and purpose, but perhaps what may come as a surprise to many is that you operate as an investment bank, only within a certain framework and with certain limitations. Can we perhaps start our conversation with understanding a bit better where the EBRD came from, what it is all about, and how it differs from other firms and organisations in the banking and investment sector?
Okay. Well, the EBRD was set up really at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union and the solidarity movement in Poland to help and foster and bring, somebody says, capitalism to Eastern Europe. So our aim was to help with the transformation, restructuring of both the economies from centrally planned to market-driven. And the mission was to ensure that we, of course, do it in a transparent way. We provide additionality. But also one of the areas that we was put into our founding agreement was to ensure that we consider sustainability and environmental issues and sustainable development. And that was, at the time, looking at the significant legacy issues of the Soviet system and the pollution, degradation, equality, which was a problem, and still is, of course. And the second issue was, of course, to stop eco-dumping at the time. So stop polluting industries from Western Europe or internationally moving into Eastern Europe and creating further pollution. So the approach was very much in the onset to be both a development bank and an investment bank. So we are a development bank in many ways, but with a different mission, because our mission is private sector. We foster private sector development, we foster entrepreneurism, we try to bring in foreign direct investment, develop the local capital markets. We also work, of course, with municipalities and but where it brings in the private sector. So a lot of areas where we can actually structure projects to put in capital markets to work, for instance, with municipalities. So the bank has evolved, and our mission was from this transition from centrally planned to over the years as progress has happened, and if we see Poland, of course, has been a great success the way it's gone. So have many of the Central European countries. We would say we had failures. I mean, Russia would be a failure in many ways. There was progress, but right now, of course, we have closed our offices in Russia and Belarus due to the ongoing war. We are a bank that was set up to help in a crisis environment and transition. So we became extremely important again in 2008-9 to help with the capital markets. We have expanded as well. No, we're not only in Central Asia, but we're also in parts of North Africa. We call it CEMED. And there is talk to move us further into Sub-Sahara. But right now, I think we will have to concentrate on helping Ukraine. And of course, Ukraine means also Poland and near abroad or the countries around to help with both decarbonization, energy efficiency, but also with liquidity. And when the crisis like now we have, I think there will be a lot of areas where we will be the bank that can provide long tenure, loans. We can, of course, also do equity investments. We look at the full spectrum of structures that we have to help with this transition from centrally planned to market economies as being from heavy energy use and carbon intensive industries and operations to less so and looking at the net zero in the long term. So we're there to help with the green transition and the EU approach. But of course, the bank's mission and heart is the same.
Yes.
The environmental and sustainability issues are fundamental, and we follow that of what other international financial institutions do, like the IFC, World Bank, EIB. They're all our sister operations. They have more development in their work, although EIB is more infrastructure. We have more the private sector. But the core approach in terms of how we address environmental, social, human rights issues are quite similar. These are very important areas that when we address. And of course, that has now transposed into ESG. So you could say that ESG has been in the DNA of the bank from the foundations.
Even before the term came.
Before the term came. Environment and social was always there. We have an environment and social policy for many, many years. The term, I think, was coined in 2004 or something like that. But before that, already we had a policy in 96, environmental, just to ensure that we follow EU approach. We also address the social, because you can't deal with transition and transformation without looking at a holistic approach. Yeah. If you don't do environment, you have to look at the social. You have to also look at governance. And we always looked at governance very much in detail, because the countries we operated in, and of course former Soviet bloc, corruption, transparency, integrity, human rights have always been at the forefront of issues. And how companies are structured, the governance of companies is very important to ensure that they actually follow best practice. And that's something we've always pushed for and do. So are we a commercial bank? No, in that sense, but we follow commercial approach. So we don't provide grants, we provide loans. We provide them on commercial basis because we're not there to compete with the private sector. We're there to supplement the private sector. In many ways, we also provide, you could say, the risk and assurance, or political sometimes risk, but generally the risk for commercial banks, where we co-finance with them because we do more due diligence, particularly on the environment.
So you can develop projects which are higher risk in nature.
Yes, and then the commercial banks feel more comfortable to provide financing for projects where we have been involved, because they know that our environmental, social, governance, financial and legal due diligence has taken to a step where we have a certain level of assurance. There's also the fact that we are owned by many countries, 68 countries, means that we have that political clout. So we are owned by nations, including Poland, a small percentage, and it is all projects are voted on, all significant projects, and have to be approved by the board. So we operate like a commercial bank with our credit risk assessment, legal assessment, and then finally it has to go to meet our mission and objectives. So of course we do we could say, maybe not censorship, but self-assessment, whether these projects meet those requirements, and then go for the board approval. And these areas are different. So we have for a long time have moved away from coal, for instance, more before many other institutions. We have, of course, exclusion lists. We would not finance weapons, hard alcohol, and areas like that. We have a human rights approach as well. We wouldn't finance a company that has significant human rights issues associated with it, and ensure that the projects are in compliance. And then those are presented to the board for discussion, approval, and for the direction from the board in terms of sometimes what future projects should look like in whichever way we do. So the bank provides now around 10 billion in the region, euros of investment, and each euro we provide is usually 3 other euros comes with it from co-financing sources. So we have a clout. We used to be the largest investor in Poland. We still are we'll probably have 1 billion euros this year of investment, and that is going to go into various sectors. But I think now with liquidity problems, and I think we will be going through a difficult time, we will be more in demand. We can't do every project. We are quite selective, but we are there to help sometimes not do the best projects, but do the right projects. And I think that's the most important thing, is to do the right project.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, it seems like you covered a lot of ground there.
I could talk for maybe a few hours, and so stop me when necessary. But that's a brief overview. I mean, it's all on our website what we do, and we're quite transparent. But the bank, I've been there for many years, and I still believe in the mission and the mandate, what it does.
I hope we still have some questions left. So let's try this one. It's fair to say that we are currently living in some challenging times, to say the least. There are lots of challenges that we're currently facing. What's more, experts are warning us that the worst may yet be to come in terms of the financial stability. You did, however, say in one of our recent conversations that the EBRD was built for crisis situations. So what actions are you currently undertaking in Central and Eastern Europe to help reduce inflation and improve food and energy security, access and independence?
Okay. As I said, we were set up to help with the transition. We've always worked in crisis mode with various crises, starting off, of course, the fall of the Soviet bloc. We had the Russian crisis. We had, of course, the issues in Georgia, in Ukraine. We've had the financial crisis. We've always, in those periods, had to step up to help, particularly the private sector. Now, we can't deal with inflation. That's not for the bank to deal. We're not that big, or that's not the areas we do. But we support the private sector. So when the crisis comes, quite often funding dries up. There are good projects which require long-term financing, and everybody looks at short-termism. And this is where we come in quite often, of looking at long-term support, of providing the support for projects which might otherwise not obtain financing from the private sector because it's drying up or it's more difficult. And also taking higher risk on those projects. But again, we're not there to resolve everything. In terms of, that's for the renewable. In terms of food, we support a lot of the food. Again, it's the longer term support. We also provide liquidity support for projects through the capital markets, and that quite often in a crisis the biggest issue is liquidity. And that again comes in, but it's sometimes difficult to just, because it's not by define green investment liquidity. It's a financial instrument, and that's why in some ways, which we'll talk about probably later, is not all our projects can be green, because they just by definition you will have to support sometimes things which are more difficult. But our heart is of course now sustainability, and that's the key area. So we're here to help to make sure that things happen and do not stagnate.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and each sector has its own challenges, and it's not possible to decarbonise all sectors very quickly. However, they still require support. So is that what you were?
Absolutely, and the decarbonisation is a transition and transformation. And it is like, in some ways, I like to look at it, as I've worked in the region and the bank for quite a while, it's a bit like changing from the mindset from centrally planned to more, you could say, economy.
Decentralised.
No, it's sort of market-led.
Okay.
And if we look at generally a lot of areas, decarbonisation is a process which will take time. It's winning the minds and hearts of people. But it's the same way as I would say, and I've used that phrase, look how things have changed even in Poland over the past 20 years of smoking in restaurants.
Absolutely.
It was something that everybody did. Everybody thought, I mean, if you stop smoking, restaurants will collapse and no one will go to restaurants or bars and anything else. We're all happier once it's gone. But it takes a mindset to change. The same with health and safety. I mean, if you look at cycling or skiing or even just generally health and safety, a few years ago or 10, 15 years ago, to put a helmet when you go in cycling, you must be crazy, or skiing.
Or even putting your seatbelts on.
Or even a seatbelt. And now it's common practice. It's the kids have taken it on board. It's normal. If you don't put it on, you're seen actually as a bit sort of off the piste yourself.
Absolutely.
So this is decarbonisation, in my view, and sustainability is a process. It's a mindset that needs to percolate down, and not only to the workforce, but also has to start off with senior management. And the management has to buy that in, understand it, and help to drive that. And of course, there is a lot of risk of green washing, but also green wishing. I wish something will be green and make declarations which will never happen. But it is an area where I think as a bank, we are there to help both industry, both restructure, and bring it on the agenda. And I think it's not only the political agenda, and we look at the decarbonisation, how it has in the past 5 years become a key topic, but it's a topic that if we all look at what's happening in nature, we see that it is no longer something theoretical. It's something that is happening. We all starting to experience it, and I think that will take shape. So we are a support and a tool. We can't resolve everything, and definitely not inflation, and that's costs of fuel and everything else, living costs. But we can support that this transition continues, which otherwise could be stalled. And I think that's the most important area for us to continue to support that.
So what projects are you working on currently as part of your running operations to make businesses and operations more sustainable?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm only a clog in the machine, and the EBRD is a big machine, and I'm just one of the many people working in different sectors. So my sectors are quite specific. But we are, of course, supporting very much green renewable energy. We're looking at decarbonisation opportunities in going from coal to gas even, which is controversial in its own right, but it's a transition process. But we're working a lot to support the solar industry and development of PVs and solar farms. There is an issue, of course, there with the supply chains and how to assess supply chains and ensure that human rights issues are not violated down in the supply chains in terms of the manufacturing. Yeah. We're looking a lot and working on wind farms and renewables, which is continuing to be a big area. We hope to finance some of the big offshore areas, but we have big projects in Central Asia, in Africa, and of course in Poland. And of course, hydrogen, decarbonisation are areas that we're developing. But we're also working on restructuring some of the heavy industry and looking at bringing more environmentally friendly technologies as well, in line with the taxonomy. All projects we do have to actually meet the Paris line, therefore that they will allow to attain net zero by 2050. We have specific European targets by 2030. We don't directly implement the EU taxonomy, but we benchmark against it, and we will be, and I'm working with on the sustainable platform on the taxonomy area. So this is going to be a very important area for us to do. And and of course supporting cities, which is a separate area, which is maybe not my area of expertise, because the bank is big, but providing support to have green cities, developing new infrastructure projects which are greener and labelled as sustainable. It's a big area, but also working with the financial markets, and we're working with capital markets, with financial intermediaries, providing specific loans, including for women's business. We're providing, of course, diversity is a very important area for us, specific areas for green technologies to be implemented. And we are also providing support to the capital markets. So we've done in the Warsaw, and we're doing right now in Prague, and we've done Bucharest, is ESG guidelines for listed companies, how they should report. And I think reporting and disclosure is going to be a big area to deal with. It's a policy. So we do a lot of policy work. It's a separate department, and more on the projects, which also supports in the institutional strengthening and bringing in some of the decarbonisation. So we've helped to implement some of the carbon trading mechanisms in some of the countries where we operate. We're looking at providing support to decarbonisation. We have a new climate governance fund to help companies bring in the climate governance or sustainability governance in-house. That's going to be a big area, because it's not an easy process to actually change the mindset. It's not just a mindset, but put the procedures in place, put the systems in place, put the governance in place in terms of how it's going to be tackled. So these are areas where we support with the clients we work, and we're expanding, and it is a new area, an interesting area, and it's something that is both needed, and we are, of course, in the region, as a regional bank, probably going to be in quite high demand, I hope.
Absolutely. So finally, organisations such as the EBRD are expected not only to enact change through their operations, but also showcase best practice on how these transitions should be undergone from within. The EBRD's new Green Economy Transition, GET for short, love the name, forms part of the bank's overall strategy for the next 5 years. Can you tell us a bit more about this project and how far have you gone in meeting its objectives?
Well, we have a target of 50% of all projects will meet the GET criteria. The GET criteria is basically for projects to be green. And there's a bit different. So there will be Paris aligned, there will be meeting the green objectives, so decarbonisation, environmental benefits. Now, and there's a difference between, let's say, the taxonomy and what our GET approach. Taxonomy is our projects are what we finance within a company and just those green projects, whilst the taxonomy is the economic activity. And so it's a bit of a difference on that side. But so we want to finance projects which sometimes will help in that transition, and therefore a lot of transition. But there will be the decarbonisation, it's to be able to demonstrate how much of our funding goes into these projects which are very defined as environmentally beneficial, decarbonisation, and meet the criteria. So it's a long book that we have. And we are also working with other international multilateral development banks on developing criteria so that we can also benchmark against each other and ensure that we have a consistent approach on an international basis. And that's an area where I think a lot of things will be happening. And generally, if we look at how the world is going in terms of standards, I mean, I'm very keen on the EU and EFRAG standards, CSRD and the ESRSs that are being now subject to consultation. The consultation's ending soon. You've got the International Sustainable Standards Boards developing international standards. And of course, nature protection and the impact of nature and financial disclosures is going to be key. And we need to make sure that we assess that and help our clients assess that in the right way and ensure that there's transparency in information. So that's going to be a big challenge for anybody working in the sustainable field. And sustainable field has grown. And as I say, I've been working a long time. It's now we've got green bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, so the full capital markets mechanisms. We're looking at sustainability-linked loans and procedure and approach, and some commercial banks are leading that way, putting benchmarks in terms of reporting. So it is an area which is both exciting, important, but it needs experts. And the big area that I think we have is not... everybody can say that they're a sustainability expert because it's a passionate area and we can all go. But sometimes you need that depth of experience of understanding what the real environmental and social issues are, how to quantify and assess them, and where are the real risks, because not all the risks, and this is where the criticism of ESG has come in, and we had the latest Economist articles on that side, is that it's not... it doesn't result that if they have ESG criteria that everything's correct. The aim for the disclosures in ESG is to ensure that we have information that is provided in a clear, transparent way, and that investors then can make the decision and the right decision in which way they want to go. And that, I think, is the most important area. It's not going to resolve everything. If you have
just a common language that helps us understand.
It's a common language and a common benchmark, and ensure that there is a common way of addressing what Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions are, what nature issues, what human rights issues are, what labour issues, what governance issue is. Percentage of women on boards is, I think, a very important area that has been neglected in many countries. I think in Poland we've seen a reduction rather than an increase, which is something which is a shame. But this will change, and if we all work together with the right approach, I think we can then resolve some of these. We might not resolve all of them, but at least help us tackle them, and maybe not mitigate but adapt in the right way. So I've been working for a long, long time in this area, and I hope to continue. But it is. But we need to integrate more experts and share information.
Well, good luck with your work, Robert. Thank you very much for our conversation. Despite it lasting a bit longer than usual, I feel like we've only still touched the tip of the iceberg.
I think we've only touched the tip of the iceberg. There's a tip and the iceberg is that big. But this is, I think, where the ESG and sustainability areas are. They touch on everything, from legal, from political, from financial to the human side to nature. It's an area which you could actually dwell a long time. And that's what makes it interesting.
So we must have you back again soon.
I hope so.
if there are any subjects that we raised today that you'd like more information on, then please get these over to our team by direct message on social media or email us at contact@greeneuropetoday.com. Thank you very much for watching.
And if I just add that, just to make sure that there's a disclaimer, these are my private comments, yes, always, but that's, I think, important. The EBRD, this is not a spokes, but it is useful to pass on the message of what we do, how we do, and for people to get in touch with us.
Absolutely,
yes.
and
So
we can help facilitate that contact. So thank you very much for watching today. See you again soon. Goodbye.
Thank you.